Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. His name is Brandon Tumblin, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. So he also goes on Instagram by at Strong Stoic. He's also known as that on YouTube. And so, Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just great, man. How are you doing?
Pretty good at myself. So, obviously, I know you talk a lot about Stoicism, which is like key thing that you're really into. So, I'm sure you probably know about like the history of Stoicism
Sure.
and how it started with like primarily with Zeno of Scythium, right?
Yep.
And the whole story of him and getting shipwrecked and everything. Would you say there's a lot in his life or just like in his philosophy that you relate to?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, yeah, Zeno was interesting. As you mentioned, he had a shipwreck and then
Yeah.
was kind of washed up on the beach thinking what's he going to do with his life and how he's going to deal with that. Basically, he had a fortune. He had very expensive things on board that he was going to sell, and of course, the storm had other plans for him. So he's sitting on the beach thinking, "How am I going to deal with this?" And yeah, he basically decided that riches is kind of an indifferent that you don't really need it to be happy, and that kind of started this whole stoic philosophy. So yeah, I mean, obviously I resonate a lot with the philosophy. I think it's a very grounded, humble, but also most importantly a practical philosophy. So people
Yeah.
can really learn a little bit about stoicism very fast and apply it to their lives that same day. And so it's incredibly beneficial, and it's also incredibly deep. So it's practical, but you can also spend the rest of your life digging deeper and learning about it. So that's what I really like about it.
That's what I like the word that you use, practical, because I feel like a lot of philosophies sometimes that are out there, they're too idealistic and not practical enough. But obviously with Stoicism, a lot of it is mostly to do with your own like mind and head. So I feel like that is obviously the one thing you can control. So that it doesn't make sense that it would be practical.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of philosophies and religions that they tend to be a bit too focused on the supernatural elements of the religion and philosophy, and to each their own. I certainly wouldn't claim that Stoicism is the best thing for everyone. If people want to follow Christianity or Islam, I mean that's completely within their rights. But however, for me, at least for my disposition, I like things that are really practical. I mean, I'm an engineer by profession, so the practical part of it of stoicism really is really what resonates with me. I like to be able to apply it to my day-to-day life.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So obviously, like we are fortunate enough to know what Stoicism is, but if you were to explain it to someone that's never probably heard of it, how would you explain that? How would you explain what Stoicism really is? It's like, I
Yeah,
guess in a summary.
yeah, I'll put it as simply as I can. So stoicism really claims that the only way that you can really find happiness and deep meaning in life, and they would call this flourishing, is essentially by adopting a good character, by being a good person essentially. So its complete focus is on virtue, is what they would call it. But really, virtue is can be sort of this weird word sometimes. But the best way to think about it, I find, for modern people is just be a good person and do the right thing. And what that means is that you do the right thing in a way that's good for yourself, but also for your family and also for the community and also for the world. And then built into that, which I have to mention because it's what brings a lot of people to stoicism, is this thing called dichotomy of control, which means that you only really focus on the things that's within your control, and you try not to be too concerned about the things outside of your control. Not that you don't care about those things, but that really in your day-to-day life you have to accept that there's a lot of things that it's really just chaos. And so there's a very small amount of things in our day-to-day life that we fully have control over. And so the stoics would say that's what you have focus on, and that's really character. You have control over your character, and that's what you should basically put your focus on, and not be too concerned about things like the weather and other people's actions. You definitely care about other people, but you have to detach yourself from other people's actions because it's not up to you.
I like that. I like that. So obviously there's a lot of Stoics out there, like throughout history, obviously. What I mean. So obviously we talked about Zeno, right? And then there's obviously Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, right? Just to name a few. I think even Epictetus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So, out of all of those, like, is there one that you would say that probably like you relate to the most?
Yeah, I tend to my favorite Stoic tends to be the one that I'm reading at the time, but I I'd have to say it's either Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. For those who don't know, Marcus Aurelius, he's just a fascinating character because he was the Roman emperor, and at that time, the Roman Empire rather was the most powerful on earth. So he was the
Yeah,
most powerful person on earth, and has this journal basically that he wrote reminding himself to be humble and to be a good person and to think of other people despite having all of that power. And I think it's a hard thing for people to grasp, but when you have that much power, it's so incredibly hard to be humble. I
yeah,
mean, you can certainly see this as you become a little bit more successful in life. You if you're if you're conscious of yourself, you'll feel your ego start to grow a little bit. And then if you extract that out and you imagine that you're the most powerful person on the planet, and that
yeah,
being Marcus Aurelius. I mean, the amount of humility and strength and virtue that you would have to be someone like that who's still reminding himself to be a good person every day. It's just incredible. So I would say I have a lot of admiration for Marcus Aurelius, probably out of the rest, but I do like them all. I got to say, especially their
yeah,
writing. You know,
yeah. No, that's for sure. I'm assuming you've probably read Meditations.
yeah, of course, yeah, several
Yeah.
times.
One of the, I guess, like funnier like criticisms of Meditations tends to be that it's too repetitive, right?
Yeah,
But obviously, it's like it wasn't really meant to be published as a book. It's just a journal. So obviously, the day-to-day life you live tends to be sometimes repetitive, right? So it's kind of like he's just writing, I guess, in a way, he's talking about his life, right? But he's also kind of reminding himself to stay on the path, right?
yes. Well, that's the thing is, and you're absolutely right. It was a journal. It wasn't supposed to be a book. And so if you can imagine whoever you are listening to this, if you're an individual, you have things that you struggle with, some tendencies that you struggle with. Maybe you tend to sleep in a little bit too late. Maybe you tend to grab your phone too much. And if you're trying to fight those bad habits, what you have to do is you have to remind yourself to fix those bad habits every day. And so if
Yeah,
you were to write a journal, you would probably bring up every day, okay, this is something I struggle with. Remind myself not to grab my phone every 5 seconds. And it's probably something that you're going to be very repetitive about because you're trying to drill in that habit. And so Marcus Aurelius was just a person at the end of the day. And that's exactly what he was doing in that journal. It's like he had tendencies just like the rest of us do, and he's trying to remind himself so he can drill in these habits and this virtue. And that does end up being repetitive as a reader, but to me, it points to the humane element of Marcus Aurelius. Like he was an actual person. He wasn't this god, this sage.
yeah,
He was a person that struggled with things, and I kind of like that, to be honest.
yeah. I feel like that's a lot more like even though he was a king, right? It makes him a lot more relatable, right?
Yeah,
Like if you read like his life story, like he went through suffering just like anyone else. Like he lost, if I'm not mistaken, his wife at some point, his kids, right? Obviously, like at that time he was fighting the Germanic tribes, right? And like, he was losing soldiers left and right. So, had to deal with a lot of problems. Because like thing is I think a lot of people will see a king and they will think that automatically this individual is spoiled. But the thing is, when you are a king, there's also a lot of like burden of responsibility on you. And
right.
one of the ways that when you read his life, it's like it kind of shows like how like a proper king should lead things in his life.
Yeah. No, I think he's a model for everyone, for all of us in our
Yeah,
lives. And as we if we're living such a life where we gain responsibility as we go through it and we move up in life, maybe at your job or whatever it is, just try and be humble. Try and remind yourself that you're just a person and you're struggling with things as well. And that really we're all gonna die at the end of the day. That's another thing about meditations
yeah,
and stoicism. It's like this humbling aspect of meditating on your death on a regular basis, not to get depressed, but to put things into perspective, right? That we are
yeah,
mortal, that we are going to die, and that at the end of the day, sure, I might, I don't know, make more money than you or have a higher position than you or whatever. But at the end of the day, we're all going to go to the same place, and that's 6 feet
yeah,
under. It's a very humbling idea.
yeah. I'm sure you've probably heard of the concept of philosopher king, right?
Sorry, what's that?
Philosopher king.
No, I'm not sure. Can you explain it?
So if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Aristotle. Like he talks about like the philosopher king, like, and I'm sure I forgot which book he exactly mentions it in, but he talks about like a utopian society, right? The only way that that could be achieved is through philosopher king, right? And I don't know if you know this, but Marcus Aurelius is like he's usually seen as like the model head for that idea. Obviously, he didn't like live in a utopian society, but he was kind of like the idea of what a philosopher king should be.
Yes, yeah. That is ringing a bell now. Yeah, he was absolutely, and I would agree with that. I think that you, all of our leaders should be philosophers first.
Yeah,
And it's like, what does it mean to be a philosopher? It's like you're focused, you're trying to figure out what's good in the world and move towards that. And if you lose sight of that as a politician or as a leader, I can't see anywhere that you're going to go that's going to be positive because you have no direction. You're looking out for yourself and you're trying to get more power. But if you don't have this ethical framework, which really is built into the study of philosophy, I don't think it's the best approach. It's not the best solution, say, for the world. It might be best for you if you're
yeah,
the king, but for everyone else, it might not turn out so good.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean because it's like Marcus Aurelius, if he wanted to, he could have been selfish, right? But he obviously chose not to. Like chose to basically lead life for something beyond just himself,
Right. Yeah,
right?
for sure.
One thing I do want to like we did talk about it. Like he did journal. So do you personally journal? And if so, like do you see like a benefit from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I journal less since I started the Strong Stoic podcast because most of my journaling now goes into the podcast episodes. So
Okay.
that's sort of the way that I deal with a lot of my thoughts. But yeah, I still journal if it's something that's maybe deeply personal. I'll still journal, and I actually I like physically writing. Like the
Okay. Yeah.
process of it is really fun. But yeah, there's just so many benefits to journaling. The best way I like to explain it is your head is kind of like this compilation of random thoughts bumping all around. It's really chaotic. There's just so many random thoughts clinging on to. If you sit down and meditate for a bit and try and still your mind, you'll find just these random thoughts coming in all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to make sense of that. But what journaling allows you to do, and writing in general, speech, all these things, this is really what logos is it allows you to take that stuff and try and like organize it and put a structure to it so that you can understand it. And so I would say that journaling is the way, the best way that you can actually reflect upon yourself and find out who you are, who you actually are, but also where you want to go and also how to get there. So I think it's unbelievably valuable. It's I think it's crucial in the philosopher's journey. I don't think you can really be on the road of self-improvement without some form of journaling or reflection or something like that.
For sure. So obviously you don't have to go into too much detail, but like what do you generally journal about?
Sure, yeah, no. I tend to for me it's like I get a question. I'm curious about something and I just want to explore it a little bit deeper. And that's really
Yeah.
the start of it. So, a lot of people tell me, people I mentor and stuff, they'll say, I don't know how to start journaling. And
Yeah.
it's like, it doesn't really matter. You just have to start writing,
Yeah.
right? But people don't like that answer sometimes. So I'll say, okay, we'll do it like this. Start with a question. And you don't have to write the question down if you don't want to, if you think that's cheesy or corny. But start with a question in your mind, like, I don't know, maybe your friend said something to you and you're really upset about it for some reason. Why are you upset about that? And then you can just start writing. You can start explaining the experience, and then you can go into the details of why. And what's going to happen is you're going to actually organize those thoughts. So, like, don't think of journaling as you know the answer and you're putting it on paper. It's like the process by which you find the answer. And so it's okay to not know what you want to write about before
Yeah.
you start writing. Just start writing. And so that's kind of what I do. It's I start with a question. It could be anything, something that's bothering me. Maybe I felt bitter or resentful or something. I felt angry about something. It's like, why did I feel that way? And I just start writing, and I normally find the answer. Sometimes it takes a couple sessions, writing sessions, but normally I find the answer. So that's the benefit of it.
I actually like that because I mean, funny. I mean, I also journal as well, but like I can relate to that as well because whenever something is bothering me, I do tend to like write it out and like through that eventually it's kind of like a release of your thoughts because it's just they're stuck in your head so much. But when you kind of like write it down, it's like okay, now they're out, and I know like now you see it from like I guess a third person perspective because now you're looking at your thoughts rather than just in your head and it's from first person.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like a reluctance to write something down?
Reluctance.
So I hear, maybe let me explain that a little bit better. I hear a
Or
lot of people that come to me and they say they there's something that they're embarrassed about or something, and they don't want to write it down. They have a fear in the back of their head that someone's going to come and read it or something, right?
oh, I wouldn't say that per se, but if anything, yeah, I would say that the reason I write because at least like I know that at least like I have enough insurance reassurance that I don't think anyone's gonna like read my journal per se.
Yeah.
But it would be more so like this is like at the end of the day, it's like I like to write about it because I know not no one's really gonna read it. At least like maybe like if they discover it like in a million years maybe, right? But I'll be long gone by then. So it's like I like writing about it, like about my inner thoughts that nobody will necessarily know about. So I guess if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, that's the way to do it, man. I always tell people I have a couple rules when it comes to journaling, and one of them is never if there's a little voice in your head telling you not to put something down for some reason,
Yeah,
that's not a good just write it down. Assume no
yeah,
one's ever going to read it, even yourself. Assume
yeah,
that. And then
yeah,
because if there's a lot of things that we feel that we're not proud of, and maybe that's why we're
yeah,
journaling about it. Again, like sometimes personally, I'll get angry at something, and it's like, what? Why am I feeling that way? What's the cause of that? What's the source of that? And I mean, a lot of times, that's not something I'm proud of, but
yeah,
if you write it down, you can learn from it, and then you can stop it from happening in the future. And so it's actually a form of redemption that you can fix yourself knowing your insufficiencies, despite the fact that you just failed. You can redeem
yeah.
yourself by improving.
That was 100% true. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would agree with that because I mean, if you want to look back on what you wrote, you can, but it's kind of like, the main reason we study history is so that we try not to repeat the mistakes that we made in the past. And you can do that with yourself too, at like a smaller scale of a level.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Sometimes I read back some of the stuff I wrote years ago. Doesn't even seem like me. It's
Yeah,
like a completely different person.
yeah, no, that's for sure. So, one thing I do want to ask you is, I'm sure you've probably heard of like Ryan Holiday, who's like he's like the I guess the modern like proponent of Stoicism nowadays, right? I
Sure.
don't know if you've like read any of his books by any chance or not.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work. I'm not a big fanboy. I haven't read a lot of his work. I tend to read the ancient texts more than modern Stoic books, but I'm very familiar with his work. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I like that. So, do you personally have any favorite Stoic books? Since you mentioned ancient.
Hmm. Favorite Stoic books. I will say that well, there's a couple that come to mind other than the ancient texts. I mean, Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, just a wonderful, wonderful book. If you're new to Stoicism, I think that's a great book because it's very practical and it's very short. Letters from a Stoic, it's basically like one page letters from this philosopher that he's writing to a mentee of his, just teaching him basic lessons on day to day life. So it's just a wonderful book and it's easy to read. Modern books, I really like Kai Whiting, he's a friend of mine actually. So, but Kai Whiting, he's a Stoic lecturer, and he wrote a book called Being Better: Stoicism for a World Worth Living in. Very short book, great introductory book for anyone that's new to Stoicism because it goes over the history very briefly, and it goes over the main principles, and it's very simple and easy to read, and it's quite short. So if you're interested in a starting book, that's a great one. And then the Practicing Stoic, another one which doesn't get talked about much, but the Practicing Stoic is a great book as well. Really delves deep if you want to get into there and lists all the quotes of the Stoics and on different topics. So that's a great one. That's by Ward Farnsworth, I believe. Yeah. So
I like that. I like that. So, well, I guess like one of the key aspects of Stoicism that I personally like is that concept of like preparing for the worst,
Hmm.
right? Because they always talk about. I think one of the things that the Stoics were like kind of against, which I find interesting, is hope,
Hmm.
right? And they would more so like prepare themselves for the worst. Like, yeah, I might get humiliated. Yeah, people might make fun of me. Yeah, I might get hurt or whatever. But by preparing for that, it's like obviously you're more prepared when if it does actually happen. Like, be also prepared for the best in life.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because I think tragedy has a way of coming for all of us. And I think we all know
Yeah,
this. This is so fascinating about human beings because we're conscious, we're aware of our own vulnerability and our own uh, mortality. We're very aware of that, and so I think that's always kind of in the back of our heads that that we are vulnerable and mortal, and that's coming someday. Yeah. So
sure.
yeah, sorry, but yeah, to get to your point, this sort of visualization of the bad things that are happening, I think that's where that stems from in a sense because doomsday is coming. It's always coming. But if you think and you visualize on the bad things that could happen, what you can do is you can come up with a mental plan for how to deal with that. And then when it actually happens, you still might be bothered by it, but at least you'll have some kind of idea for how to deal with that. And companies do this today, by the way, they call it a risk register, which is basically when you start a project, what you do is you list out all the things that could potentially go wrong. And then you list out next to it what you're going to do if that happens. And it's like this is a practice that's done in the professional work environment today. And you can also do it individually. You can think, well, what's going to happen? How am I going to deal with if I lose my job, if my girlfriend breaks up with me, if my mother dies, if this and that? And then it still might be painful. That's not to say that when it happens that you're going to be smiling and happy about it. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you a backup plan. So, well, if I lose my job, I have this job that I could maybe apply for, and I think I could get at least to get me through till I get another job, or if my mother dies, I'm going to make sure I journal about that and get therapy about it and talk with my friends and whatever it is, you have a plan in place. So it's very beneficial, but sometimes sometimes painful to do, let's say.
Yeah. One of the things, at least one thing I realized about Stoicism is that when times are good, it seems very easy to apply. But when times are bad, it's so much harder. And it's like that's when it actually matters though. When times are bad, that's when, to actually follow through with.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's yeah, and I think there's a Stoic quote. It sounds like a Seneca quote, but it's like you can tell how good a person is by how he deals with bad times, not by how he deals with good times. Because it's easy to be good when things are going well,
Yeah.
but when you get caught in the rain or when your house burns down or when God forbid someone in your family dies or when you lose your job, it's like how are you going to deal with that? That's what makes you a good person is dealing with those rough times because this is something that's really encouraging for people. If you can be that person that's strong that can deal with tragedy, man, you're going to be so valuable as a person. That's not to say that you don't take time for yourself to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and recover properly, but if you can be the person that when shit hits the fan at work or something, you can pick up the responsibility and carry it. Man, you're going to be so valuable as a human being, and you're also going to have a lot of meaning in your life because there's nothing more meaningful than carrying a load, especially if it's in a tragic situation and not everyone has the strength to deal with such things. And if you can be that person, God, man, that's something to aim for.
No, that's for sure. One of the things it's like, um, a lot of the times I've gotten this question about like, you know, I guess passion, right? Like things that like it could be like, I guess a career, right? And I would say to them is that you will never know if you like it on your good days because, it's easy to do it on your good days, right? But you will find out on your bad days that if you still want to keep doing this and keep pursuing it, it's on those days that you will have a deeper sense of love for it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love that because I often think about that in terms of Yeah, exactly that. If someone's having a bad day or if they're fighting in their relationship and you take them out of that situation and you ask them if they're happy. Not if they're happy right now, not if they're feeling joy
Yeah.
right now, but are you happy with this relationship? Are you happy with their job? And they actually are happy with it. They'll say, "Yeah, I'm just frustrated right now, but yes, I still love the job." Versus someone that is in, say, a relationship or a job that's going really well and they're just looking for things to complain about.
Oh
They're
yeah.
just bitter all the time. And that sometimes that's a matter of perspective. Sometimes we get bogged down in negative thought patterns. And so it's good to, I guess, cleanse that in some way and change those thoughts. But but yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I think that's the way it should be in general, for sure.
True. Now, obviously, before you discovered Stoicism, what would you say the biggest thing Stoicism like changed in your life? Would you say?
Before Stoicism.
Well,
So
like,
what did,
I mean, I meant like, I guess once you discovered it, like, what did it change like for the better? What was the biggest thing? Would you say?
gotcha. Okay. I would say it really gave me a sense of connection with everything. And that's, I guess, of fitting in. And that's the wonderful thing about Stoicism is that no matter who you are, if you're a social rabbit or if you're a loner, there's a place for you in the world. It doesn't just consider connection with human beings, though that's really important, but it's also about connection with what they would call the cosmos, which is everything. It's like finding harmony in your life, no matter where you are, you can find that. And I think Stoicism does a great job of doing it. That's one of the more spiritual elements of Stoicism. But yeah, for sure. I think personally, I would say that that's been a huge beneficial thing for me is just feeling that connection with everything and everyone.
Yeah. So kind of like, I guess the connection with like your surrounding, or yeah, I guess you could even say like the universe itself. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Just with everything, because in Stoicism, there's not a supernatural deity as a god, so not
yeah,
capital G God like you would think in Christianity. It's God is everything. It's
yeah,
kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's everything that exists is God. It's naturalistic, and so it's not supernatural at all. And so yeah, it's like with everything, with your environment, with your surroundings, with the sky, with the rocks, with your drink, with anyone you meet on the
yeah.
street. It's all about connection and you recognizing your very crucial place in that overall plan.
It's true. That's true. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Stoics they do refer to like nature, right?
Yeah,
That's I think that might be what you're relating to, right?
yeah, yeah. Nature on all levels of analysis. So nature meaning nature, the cosmos as we would think about it,
Yeah,
but also your personal nature, what you're interested in, and who you are as an individual, and also the nature of your environment. So there's like three environments there. We have to feel good in our own skin. And live in a way that's according to our personal nature. We have to live in a way that's aligned with our environment, immediate environment. And then we need to be aligned with reality herself, you could say, because, you know, you can live with a family, say, in the middle of the woods and have your own kind of idea about reality. But if you're not aligned with reality, that's not going to work out for you in the long term because eventually
yeah,
reality has a way of snapping back if you try and ignore it. So if you can balance those three things, yourself, your environment, and reality, that's the way to really find what I would call harmony in life. And that's really happiness and flourishing, right?
I like that. I like that. So I'm sure you've probably heard of it was one of the schools of philosophy that was I guess a big opponent against Stoicism, Epicureanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It was like obviously they have some interesting ideas as well, but like I guess they tend to be a bit more hedonistic in their approach.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's just a matter of priority. I was actually talking with my good friend Josh Bertolotti in Search of Wisdom podcast, but on this. it's just a matter of priorities, right? Because the biggest difference between Stoicism and Epicureanism is Stoics want to engage in society.
Yeah,
There's a very important element of being pro-social. Not that you can't be in the woods by yourself and be a Stoic, but generally speaking, there's this requirement to engage socially into society and your environment in whatever way suits you as an individual. The Epicureans were more, let's go to a cabin in the woods and bring some good friends and really enjoy the drinks and really enjoy the friends and really enjoy the scenery and kind of like the culture of today in many ways in the
yeah,
West. There's a lot of Epicureans in the West, and I actually think there's a place for that. I do because if you get up in the morning and you really like coffee, I don't think it's beneficial to just not enjoy it. If you really enjoy it, you can enjoy it and focus on enjoying it. That's kind of like engaging in that pleasure. But I do think the Stoics were right in that we do have a moral obligation to make the world a better place, as I would call it.
yeah. No, that's for sure. It's like the difference between pleasure and discipline, I guess. Like,
Mm-hmm.
or like basically
Yeah.
when to draw the lines. Like you don't want to like too like overindulge in something.
Right. Right. And I think the Epicureans were a bit good on that too, that they didn't want to overindulge per se, but they did say pleasure is the only good, whereas Stoics would say no, virtue is the only good, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, just a difference of priority, I would say.
yeah, no, that's for sure. I guess in a way it'd be like your own pleasure, right? Compared to I guess the pleasure of helping people or the pleasure of virtue even, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that you can actually do things. You can train yourself to do things for the world that you actually get joy from. Here's an interesting thing. When you're young, or I guess I can only really speak from my own experience, but when I was young, sometimes I would actually feel bad about doing good. I know that's weird, but it's almost like if I don't know, like when I was a teenager, if I said something maybe nice to my mother, it's almost like a little angry about that, right?
Oh,
Like almost a little angry and embarrassed about that. And then, so you can actually train yourself to feel bad about doing good. And this exists in human nature. If you really watch yourself, you'll see that. So you can train yourself to do that, or you can train yourself to feel good when you do good. And that's what virtue is. It's not just doing good, it's doing good and deriving pleasure from it. This is kind of where the Epicureans come in because again, the Stoics say that if you become virtuous, you basically have more pleasure. So there is a connection here, right? Um,
yeah,
but the bottom line is that you can train yourself absolutely to feel bad about doing bad, to feel good about doing bad, feel bad about doing good, or to feel good about doing good. Those are your options. And the more you
yeah,
practice that over time, the less toxic you are, you will tend to get towards that virtue element, which is doing good and feeling good about it. And that's the way to be. That would be a great way to be. Imagine that,
yeah.
right?
No, that's for sure. I know what you mean because it's like let's just say for example, right? Like maybe you donate some money to charity, like or you give some money to a homeless man, right? Or like you buy him some food. You will feel like it'll be that feeling that you have that yeah, like a form of pleasure in a way that you
Right.
feeling good about helping someone.
Right. Or you can feel bad about that because you can also say, okay, just take the money, and then you can leave
Yeah,
thinking, oh well, he's just going to buy drugs with it anyway, and then get mad about that.
yeah.
So you can absolutely feel good about that or bad about that, and that really gets down to practice and perspective, how you think about it.
No, it's 100% true. Yeah, I mean you can look down upon the less fortunate for sure. That is 100% true.
Yeah, we all do. I think that's
Yeah.
something we need to guard against.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, we do need to obviously like try our best not to look down on someone who's less fortunate than us, right?
Yeah.
Because someone above us can do the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, certainly I found to become less judgmental with life as with understanding and compassion and self wisdom. As one of the
Yeah,
things that you learn about other people. when you learn about yourself. I mean, that's really what you do. When you learn who you are and your own insufficiencies, you tend to have more compassion for other people, and so you become less judgmental. And so that's something to strive for. To really, if you're judging people and feeling shame towards them, it's probably because you have some self awareness issues. You're not so aware of and in tune with your own insufficiencies. Because if you were, you'd probably recognize that, man, people are just so complicated and struggling. And God, I mean, life is hard. Life is really tough, and we all
Yeah,
start at different levels, and we all have different hands that are given to us. So unless you've walked someone's whole life in their shoes, you really can't say that you would do anything better. You really
yeah,
can't.
it's true. It's true. So before we end off, do you have anything you want to say before that you didn't feel like you got the chance to say, or any closing thoughts?
No, I think just a big thanks, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. Always love talking about stoicism.
Yeah, no, for
Uh,
sure.
but no, I appreciate it. I appreciate your work in the world.
No, I appreciate like I'm really honored to have you on here because I've seen some of your stuff and I like it honestly.
Oh,
And
thank you very
I'd love
much.
to have you on here again, like sometime in the future as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I'd love to come back as we both become more wise.
Yeah, hopefully we do our best and become more wise. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, but for everyone that enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. Check out, Brandon Tumblin at Strong Stoic. And until next time, peace.